Next topic is attributes. An attribute is a property or characteristics of an entity. In other words, an entity described using attributes in a database. All entities is an entity set have the same set of attributes. Some examples of attributes, that is, employee contains EMP number, EMP name, salary. Next, student contains student number, student name, course. Next, DEPT contains department number, DEPT name. We can deeply discuss about attributes. In relational databases, attributes are the describing characteristics or properties that define all items pertaining to a certain category applied to all cells of a column. The rows instead are called tuples and represent data sets applied to a single entity to uniquely identify each item. In relational databases, attributes are describing characteristics or properties that define all items pertaining to a certain category applied to all cells of a column. The rows instead are called tuples and represent data sets applied to a single entity to uniquely identify each item. Attributes are therefore the characteristics of every individual tuple that help describe its unique properties. Think of a table in a relational database as being analogous to an electronic spreadsheet. An attribute is simply one non-null cell in the spreadsheet or the conjunction of a column and row. It stores only one piece of data about the object represented by the table in which the attribute belongs. For example, the tuple can be an invoice entity. The attributes of an invoice might be prince, price, number, date, or paid, unpaid. Beyond the self-explanatory, simple or single valued attributes, there are several types of attributes available. Number one, compose attributes is an attribute composed of several other simple attributes. For example, the address attribute of an employee entity could consist of the street, city, postal code, and country attributes. Next, multi-valued attribute is an attribute where more than one description can be provided. For example, an employee entity may have more than one email ID attributes in the same set. Next, key attributes or primary attribute is an ID, key, letter, or number that uniquely identifies that item. For example, it can be the number of a certain invoice, example, the individual ID of that invoice. A table that contains a single key attribute is considered a strong entity. However, a table might contain more than one key attribute if it's derived from other tables. An attribute is a property or characteristics of an entity. In other words, an entity describing using attributes in database. All entities in an entity set have the same set of attributes. Some examples of attributes: EMP contains EMP number, EMP name, SAR. Student contains student number, student name, course. DEPT contains department number, department name. Next, derived attributes. As the name implies, these are derived from other attributes, either directly or for specific formula results. For example, the age attribute of an employee could be derived from the date of birth attribute. In other instances, the formula might calculate the VAT of a certain product, so that whenever the cell with the attribute payment is paid, the cell with the derived attribute VAT automatically calculates its values. An attribute is a property or characteristic of an entity. An entity may contain any number of attributes. One of the attributes is considered as the primary key. In an entity relation model, attributes are represented in an elliptical shape. Example, student has attributes like name, age, roll number, and many more. To uniquely identify the student, we use the primary key as roll number as it is not repeated. There are 5 such types of attributes: simple, composite, single value, value, and derived attributes. Take number 1, simple attributes. An attribute which cannot be further subdivided into components is a simple attribute. Example: the roll number of a student, the ID number of an employee. Number 2, composite attributes. An attribute which can be split into components is a composite attribute. Example: the address can be further split into house number, street number, city, state, country, and pin code. The name can also be split into first name, middle name, and last name. Number 2, single value attributes. Is the attribute which takes up only a single value for each entity instant is single value attribute. Example: the age of a student. Number 4, multi-value attribute. The attribute which takes up more than a single value for each entity instance is multi-value attribute. Example: whole number of the students, landline, and the mobile. Next, fifth one, derived attributes. An attribute that can be derived from other attributes is derived attribute. Example: total and average marks of the students. In Rdbms, the table organizes the data in rows and columns. The columns are known as attributes, whereas the rows are known as records. Example: the school maintains the data of students in a table named students. Suppose the data they store in table is student ID, student name, and student age. To do this, they have made 3 columns in the table. Student ID, student age, student name. Suppose we have a classroom. In this classroom, we have many students, then how do we differentiate one student from another? It is a property of each student that helps us in doing so. A student can have many properties like his name, age, height, class, roll number, etc., which will help him identify each student distinctly. What is this property called? Images this. We are talking about attributes. And we have read about the vector components. The real world property of an entity type is called attributes. This is a characteristic of an entity. It is represented by an oval or ellipse diagram. Each attribute can take only a set of permitted values. This is called the domain of that attribute. For example, we define the real number of the student by a numeric value. So the permitted values are only integers, and hence integer is the domain of attributes real number. Each attribute is represented by a separate column in the relation theorem. For example, the entity student has properties like name, address, roll number, mobile number, age, date of birth, class, section, etc. So when we make an inventory, then name, address, roll number, mobile number, age, date of birth, section, and class are represented as the attributes of the entity type student. We see that we have used various modified oval symbols to represent the diagram. Entity and attribute are the most common terms of Rdbms. The fundamental difference between the entity and attributes is that an entity is an object that exists in the real world and can be easily distinguished among all other objects of real world, whereas the attributes define the characteristics of the properties of an entity on the basis of which it is easily distinguishable among other entities of the real world. In the relational database, we collect the data in the form of table. So the rows of the table represent the entities of the same type, and the columns of the table are considered as attributes of the entities present in that table. An entity is a distinguishable real-world object that exists. An attribute describes the elementary feature of an entity. Next, in the relational data model, an entity is represented as a record in an entity set. In the relational data model, the field represents an attribute. A row in a database table is an entity. The column header of a database table is an attribute. The grouping. Entities of similar types are placed in one entry. Groups of attributes that easily identifies a traffic form entity. An entity can be a tangible entity or an intangible entity. Each attribute has a certain domain and it may be involved in forming a key. A student tuple in a student table in the database represents an entity. Name, roll number, ID, address. These fields of student table represents the attribute of student table. Attribute describes the characteristics or properties of an entity in a database table. An entity in a database table is defined with a fixed set of attributes. For example, if you have to define a student entity, then we can define it with a set of attributes like roll number, name, course. The attribute values of each student entity will define its characteristics in the table. In a relational database, we store data in the form of tables. The column header of the table represents the attributes. A table must not have duplicate attributes. Each attribute in a table has a certain domain, which allows it to accept certain set of values. In an entity, each attribute is allowed to have only one value, which could be number, text, date, time, etc. Attributes are further defined such as keys. A single attribute or a set of attributes that can distinguish an entity in an entity set relation is termed as key. In the database, we have a primary key, super key, composite key, foreign key. All of them are created with a certain purpose to normalize a relation in the database. As you can see, in a student table, we have three attributes: roll number, name, and course. The attribute values of each student entity define its characteristics in the table, which in turn helps us to identify each student entity in the student table. And computing an attribute is a specification that defines the property of an object, element, or file. It may also refer to or set the specific value for a given instance of such. For clarity, attributes are shown more correctly considered metadata. An attribute is frequently and generally a property of a property. However, in actual usage, the term attribute can and is often treated as equivalent to a property depending on the technology being discussed. An attribute of an object usually consists of a name and a value of an event, a type or class name or a file, a name and extension. Each named attribute has an associated set of rules called operations. One does not sum characters or manipulate and process an integer array as an image object. One does not process text as type floating point. It follows that an object definition can be extended by imposing data typing, a representation format, a default value, and legal operations and restrictions are all potentially involved in defining an object. Follows that an object definition can be extended by imposing data typing, a representation format, a default value, and legal operations and restrictions are all potentially involved in defining an attribute, or conversely may be spoken of as attributes of that object type. A JPEG file is not decoded by the same operations. However, similar they may be, these are all graphics data formats as a PNG or PMP file. None is a floating point type number operated upon by the rules applied to type long integers. For example, in computer graphics, line objects can have attributes such as thickness with real values, color with a descriptive values such as brown or green or values defined in a certain color model such as RGB, dashing attributes, etc. A circle object can be defined in similar attributes plus an origin and radius. In reference to computer systems, attributes are defined particularly for read or write attributes for specific read or write. If the element in question could be considered a property of another entity, the element can have 0 or more attributes of its own is of. In the programming language, attributes are metadata attached to a field or a block of code like assemblers, members, and types, and are equivalent to annotations in Java. Attributes are accessible to both the compiler and the programmatically through reflection. Users of the language see many examples where attributes are used to address cross-cutting concerns and other mechanist or platform uses. This creates the false impression that this is their sole intended purpose. Their specific use as metadata is left to the developer and can cover a wide range of types of information about any given application, classes and members that is not instance specific. The decision to expose any given attribute as a property is also left to the developer, as in the decision to use them as part of a larger application framework. Attributes are implemented as classes that are derived from. They are often used by the CLR services like COM, interoperability, remoting, serialization, and can be queried at runtime. Positional parameters like first parameter of type string above are parameters of the attributes constructed. Name parameters like the Boolean parameter in the example. Okay, thank you.